this morning we had luck. But now I would like to actually introduce our first speaker. This is Studio Ossidiana by Alessandra and Giovanni. They are designers, architects based in Rotterdam. And we invited them to come to the region around, I think, 1.5 years ago. Because we would love to work with them, and they really immerse themselves in the local spa culture here. They had even a treatment by a Knijp professional, which we will elaborate later on. And we really wanted to involve them in the program. They made wonderful proposals on how to kind of make a modern spa, how to do it contemporarily. So they did these wonderful proposals. Of course, with any Biennale, with any art event, a design event, the ambitions are going through the roof. And these projects we were not able to realize. But it doesn't mean that the ambition ends there, because we would still love to see it realized in the short run, actually. So they are renowned architects, designers. Those living in the Netherlands maybe know about Museum M. It was presented at the Floriade in Almere for the first time, and it's a wonderful architecture that's still there. But also more temporary works, like a floating garden in Istanbul, or even a place for both birds and humans in Stockholm. And we would like to give them the word to show some of the previous works, but also focus on the proposals that they did for us before. So Alessandra is in Italy at the moment, I think at a very remote location. So she was afraid of the internet connection. This morning, she recorded the lecture for us to be very, very sure that we could get a good quality of her lecture. She's here also now. I don't know if her internet is stable enough. Do you want to say hi, Alessandra?
No, thank you for the wonderful introduction, and actually seeing also the video with the beautiful work of the rainbow brought up like these beautiful memories of our visit to Bad Wildbad. We really had a very nice time there. It was beautiful to see the connection of the town with the ants, and like a series of activities that were starting unfolding there, and of course the relation with water. So yeah, I would love to be there with you now. And yeah, as Willem mentioned, it's a bit complicated situation now for me, but I recorded the presentation. And in the presentation, I do basically an introduction of our studio, and then I show two projects to contextualize a little bit what Willem was saying about our work. In particular, I'm showing a project that is a sort of almost a spa for humans and birds, the project in Stockholm. Another project that we really love called the Fire Dune, a landscape of dunes with a series of kitchens and places to cook open air in the Netherlands. And then I dive a little bit deeper in our proposals for Ornamenta, which, yeah, so it's, yeah, that's it. So I think that, because maybe you hear me, but I heard your conversation a little bit split up. So if you could share the video for me, it would be great.
Hi, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm Alessandra, and together with Giovanni Bellotti, I lead Studio Ossidiana, an architecture and design practice based in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands. And today I will start with a brief introduction about Studio Ossidiana, and then I go and present a few projects that we designed, and then I will show you our proposal for Ornamenta. So I will start sharing screen. And as a studio, we work mainly on projects in the public realm. We design playgrounds and artworks. And last year, we completed a small museum in Almere, still in the Netherlands. And we often work between temporary and permanent projects, but we always try to work on spaces that require some form of action, whether performance, gardening, or maintenance. And we look at projects as intermediaries between people and materials, people and climates, and as mediative objects or spaces between our species and others. And often our projects are rather small in scale, but they have a territorial vocation, and we always try to address and speak of other scales with our project, proposing and looking at different understanding of territories. And as I was mentioning, today I would like to present 3 projects: a public space for humans and birds, a landscape of dunes where to cook open air, and the landscape of waters that we proposed to Ornamenta. And like the first project I would like to show is called Utumusverket. And a few years ago we were invited to work on an installation for Arctes, the Swedish National Museum for Design and Architecture. And Utumusverket refers in its name to things done in public space, and it is the name of the summer program of Arctes, for which we were asked to design a public space for the summer, while the museum closed its door because of the pandemic. And Arctes is on the island of Skeppsholmen, along with other museums of the city. And the island is beautiful, while the public art collection of the museum, which is around, is somewhat intimidating. In fact, we were almost surrounded by Calder and Picasso sculptures. And the site itself, Exercisplan, however, was a tarmac-covered surface used throughout the year as a parking lot. And as we began to work from a distance, without the chance of visiting the place because of lockdowns, we envisioned the project as a map, as a mineral garden of intersecting elements, inhabited by plants, loose materials, and artificial rocks, the sort of foreign world that has sprouted from the tarmac of Exercisplan. And so we drew it as a small planet, following the dusk and dawns of the summer solstice, as well as the dusk range during summer, like an inevitable solar calendar. And we imagined it as a civic stage for urban and horticultural rituals, digging, getting the feet wet, picking up flowers or some berries, as a place where to play games, giving speeches or lectures, gather, sleeping or sunbathing on the sundial. And in this place, even the most modest action would become a performance. And it was framed by a wave between the edge of a garden and a petrified chaiselong, like as a place to sit, lay on run on top. And it was dotted by man-made rocks as a platform for games, plants and seeds, where to play chess or backgammon. And the frame was also intersected by an inaccessible garden, which we saw as an embassy of the Swedish forest, with mosses, different types of berries, ivy, and a jumberry tree. And it was a garden only accessible to bird, and for us was also a play on the paradox of wilderness, the genre of nature that we treasure the most, precisely because we think we are not part of it. And it had an opening for people to pick through, but forbid their entrance. And the selection of plants was in fact curated by a local nursery. And around it, 6 tall perches were thought of structures for play and for birds to rest upon. And they were casting shadows on the ground that would be visible from a bird-eye perspective, like a projected language. And at the center was a mirror of water reflecting the sky and the surrounding. And in Utumusverket, some stories, small but important things we didn't really expect, unfolded throughout the summer. And in fact, almost immediately, the installation was discovered by the feathered inhabitants of the museum island and understood as an open buffet. And from a duck perspective, the whole project was probably seen as an inevitable dish. Seashells are part of their diets, as they supply extra calcium, while the water plants turn out to be an out-of-season delicacy. And actually, birds regarded the whole place as a spa, where to dry in the sun or bath in the waters. And so the pond soon became a nursery for goslings. And while the bird perches and feeders, which intersected the installations, were immediately occupied by a flock of seagulls, which used them as vantage points, and as they cared for their seagull chicks on the bottom. And the museum curators, they were slowly turning into bird keepers, were also fast to capitalize on the cuteness, organizing a series of morning sessions with yoga alongside the chicks. And but all the situation also left us worried all summer about the well-being of other birds. So the families of ducks and geese beneath that were potential prey to the larger seagulls above. And meanwhile, summer unfolded and the games found people to play them, sometimes in unexpected ways. And this slide is here mainly to demonstrate that there were also people playing around, not only birds. And then when we returned to Stockholm towards the end of the summer, we were very happy to discover that the pristine Swedish forest had escaped its mandate of imaginary wilderness, becoming home to some oversized sunflowers sprouted from salty snacks, which we believe we bought at the 7-Eleven during the installation, and we inadvertently dispersed in the bird garden. And some of the most beautiful moments were at the end of the season, when the plants had settled and the soils had mixed. And this made us think at the project as a form of cultivation, where materials and textures change over time, and the minerals meet the organic. And this space was a stage of negotiations between curators, the public, and the many birds. In fact, there were very few protected geese and gulls which tried to intimidate visitors, and the cleaning up was quite some work. And the geese would have the space in the evening, but the morning was reserved for yoga classes, and on the long run, yoga and chick nurturing turned out to be incompatible. And one of the curators in July was tasked with moving a gull chick who had fallen from a perch to a safe spot on the island, but the gulls did not forget, and he had to enter the museum wearing a hoodie for the rest of the season. But all this gave another meaning to the notion of curation, or maybe it stressed its true meaning. And for us, it's a bit the point of what we want to celebrate with our work, to take care of things. Becoming gardeners here meant taking care of the human and non-human population of Utomusverket, negotiating between different desires of different species and adjusting every day depending on the events. And the second project I would like to show is called the Fire Dunes, and it's a project which was built in 2021 when we were commissioned to design a fireplace in a public space in Utrecht. And in the horizontal landscape of the Netherlands, we often look for mountains, from the dunes that protect the country from the sea, to the sand transported on the barges, and to the heaps of sand around construction sites. A landscape we are seeing emerging in many places, which we started to recognize almost as a genre of landscape. So we were commissioned by an association from Utrecht to think of an installation in their space, and their site was a vast inhabited construction site, a landscape of dunes, heaps of sand, earth and bricks, and we remain quite fascinated. In fact, our impression of the Netherlands is one of a country maintained like a ship, but here we find a contemporary wilderness. And we think that between the artificial dunes that protect from the sea and the temporary ones of Utrecht, there is not a big difference. They are all dredged from the North Sea. And the project of the territory is the same, of a country whose energy is fully oriented towards rebuilding itself. And in this context, we were asked to design a fireplace for the association, and we started collecting images of fires, stoves, chimneys, campfires, so collective rituals of open-air fires, but also domestic chimneys, at times real rooms dedicated to fire, big enough to be inhabited. We are also fascinated by Eastern European stoves, so these warm macro objects that can be bed, oven, kitchen, between architecture, furniture, and a model of a building. And our project became a series of variations on a fireplace with a portal, a kitchen, a scenographic wall, and a crater on the top with different orientations to protect from the wind. And it becomes a dune as it's covered in sand, and the dune itself is heated by each fireplace. And so it's a sort of geological stove made of sand where fireplaces heat the room and the sand itself as the fires are lit, and offers place to cook between the dunes. And this is the project when we lit the fires for the first time, and we tried the barbecue, and we cooked for the first time. And it looked almost like being within a sand cave. And we also tested the oven with some pizzas, and the chefs were Dutch. The pizza was not amazing, but nobody gave the fault to the oven. It actually tested a little bit sandy. But then, like with this project, we tried to create a public space that could bring together the domestic intimate scale of the domestic kitchen and the collective one of the campfire. And in the meantime, the surroundings change again. The installation becomes surrounded by buildings that observe the dunes as they were a strange guest in the garden, memory of the past heaps. And it became quite lively over time, and it kept sending a smoke signal across the square, visible from the train station. And these one are the photos of the process of the installation by Riccardo De Vecchi, a photographer we are collaborating, to whom we asked to photograph the project and different installation projects. And these photos are quite important for us, as they show architecture not as something fixed, but as something moving, that changes shape. And it also gives the idea of working on a model one-to-one. It was mostly like the same process and materials of our small maquette, of course, the different equipment. And it suggested the idea of a landscape that could change and transform any time. And the scraper was almost as a sort of mechanical gardener whose homes are the dunes. And well, we went a few times to see it, and it was never the same. And one evening we found like a camper parked in front of it, with a couple warming up in front of the fire, burning the ashes of the fire before going to bed. And so it was something between a landscape, a kitchen, and a playground. And it became this kind of large landscape to explore and climb. One afternoon we went there, and there was this guy doing all these acrobatic jumps on the sand from the volcano. And so it's a project made of sand, but actually made of footprints and traces of fire, smell of food cooking, sand and logs burning. And as the project is mostly made of sand, which becomes a material through its use, and it makes no sense without actions. And then, like, I would like now to talk about like our proposal for Ornamenta. And so last year we were approached by Ornamenta. We were asked to design an object space that would relate with the rich tradition of the spa and naip of the region, and at new ways to deal with water flows and how those could inspire and be translated in new contemporary forms. So last August we were invited to visit Bad Wildbad, and we started looking at the waters of the Enns, and we saw how the river was something truly lived by the residents and visitors of the town. And some parts of the river were domesticated with platforms to rest and take sun in the meadows, or like created water games. Others were really dedicated to play with water. Other parts were inaccessible, but crossed by bridges or locks. We really loved this covered lock, like in the center of the town. And we also looked at the light and punctual infrastructure of the naip facilities that were following the river and the water course, but also its lightness. So it's really like the naip facilities have this beautiful language of steel handles that reminded us play infrastructure. And or we looked at this also at naip paths that were full of textures in the ground that would enhance the senses. And then following waters, we visited the spas of the town, and it became evident in how in Bad Wildbad the ground is crossed by an hidden system of pipes, while technical rooms are filled with pumps. And this like immediately reminded us of Calvino's city of Armilla, which is, he describes in The Invisible City, this is a city which is made by a forest of pipes that end up in taps, showers, sprouts and overflows, inhabited by nymphs, like a city that is like really a city of pipes, as if like all the bricks would have fallen and disappeared. And all this word made us think of an architecture of pipes, of water and ground platforms, and a landscape inhabited by light structures. And these are some references that we really love, and as Palace at 4 AM by Giacometti, or Noguchi Performance Jungle Gym, or Adventure Playgrounds by Riccardo Dalisi in Naples. So an architecture of lines, pipes, sprinkling water, and an architecture of air. But also an architecture of the ground with its texture and mud, a geological architecture. So in this process, we began to think of a light infrastructure across the river ends that could take different forms. We imagined fragments of a landscape and affordances scattered along the river, celebrating water as a civic space. And so, like in this context, like we proposed 3 spaces, fragments in a way of the same project, a platform, an archipelago of islands, and a bridge. And these were only proposals, which we haven't built yet, but we hope it will be possible to realize them in the future. And so this one is called the platform, and is designed as an abstract map of the region where to lay or play, like possibly by the water. And then we were asked to propose an installation in the entrance of Bad Wildbad Forum, which was a former bathhouse. And we thought how our design could be objects that only temporarily installed inside, but made to live outside. And so only temporary inhabiting the whole of the forum. And so this are some views of how we imagine entering the exhibition space. So like that would be surrounded by a curtain, and we imagine it as this kind of abstract map where peaks, trees, and rivers becomes affordances where to sit or lay on top, and where the forest would become a game of light and water sprinkles. And like another idea was to propose a collection of islands that could be scattered across the landscape close to the river or in the river. And here again a diagram of the pieces inside the forum, a forest of light structure emerging from a landscape, declining water in its various states, from fog to mist to drizzle, scattered in the landscape, and so as accessible as a natural basin, a waterfall or a rock geyser in the sun. So for us this proposal was like really this kind of city of pipes and water games, as in Armilla, Italo Scalvino city. And like the other proposal was the bridge, and which is a narrow bridge that we imagine crossing the ends, and that could where people could walk barefoot, echoing the night facilities in the area and the architecture of the lock. That we imagine that it would hover just a few centimeters above the water. And it's a bridge made of different tiles, and we imagine each tile with a texture made with different finishing or games to be played from the bridge or the river beneath. So it's a bridge to cross, but also a covered bench on the river where to play chess or backgammon with the feet in the water. And by night could be a little infrastructure that brings light and will be lit. And for the interior, we imagine to install the bridge surrounded, also surrounded by a curtain, to really defining an inner space within the bigger room. And picking from the curtains, visitors could see the bridge tiles as a promenade inspired by night walks on textures installed on a bed of pebbles and rocks as a sort of riverbed. And we imagine that the bridge and the tiles will be surrounded by a collection of models that will be suggestions for other water facilities in the valley, as round bridges or platforms, water play elements, and that together could propose a new language for the waters of the ends. And we imagine the ground of the projects materialized as artificial rocks, embedding local materials and offering different textures that together would narrate the material history of the region, adding games or textures to walk on top. And we really hope that in the future we will be able to realize one or more of these rooms for the river. And with this project, we aim to think of them as infrastructure that facilitates crossing, immersing, or hovering above a body of water for health and pleasure, a soft gradient between the useful and beautiful. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I also really hope that the projects will be realized in Bad Wildbad at some point. Thank you. Bye bye.